This is Render, an oral Bible translation software tool. Faith Comes by Hearing has been developing Render in partnership with Pioneer Bible Translators and Seed Company since June of 2013. I'll give you a demo today and just want to let you know that I'm not going to attempt to train users, but just give you a general overview of the software. So here we are at our Render login page. We have all of the users for the project on this one machine for the demo. However, in a real project, these users would probably be on different machines. You can see a lot of words here, but Render really was developed with the oral communicator in mind, so you can replace these words with symbols if that's preferred. So a little bit of an overview on the process. We have our two translation teams here. These translation teams will be translating different sets of passages of Scripture, and they will be reviewing each other's work in a peer review process. After that process, it will go to the community for checking, and then after the community check, it will go to a consultant for checking. Now, before it gets to the consultant, we will do a back translation, and we have two different types of back translation. I'll show you that in a little bit. And then the back translations can also be transcribed for the consultant. Render can also translate notes between the consultant and the translation team in the case that they don't speak a common language. And that's what Note Translate is here for. So let's jump in here to the first translation team. So here we are on our Render homepage. Now, one thing you'll notice is that we have some big icons, and for every word, there's an icon. That makes sure that nothing is left out for the oral communicator. We also have colors here, and colors are really important in Render. So you can see we have some gray colors, and that means it's inactive. We can't do anything. We also have yellow, which means that we have work to do. So that will guide us through the software. We also use a third color, blue, as an optional action, and I'll show you that in a little bit. One thing I also want to point out is our sync button here. Our sync button is yellow, meaning we should send our files, but because we have all of the users on this one device, we won't need to sync at all today. Render does offer three different types of syncing. We have a local area network sync, and that will send and receive files on a local router, and you don't need internet to use that. We also have a web sync, which uses internet to send files, and that will work if people are even in different countries across the world. Our third type of sync uses a USB stick dongle, and that will send the files and receive them. So let's jump in here and click on our yellow translate icon. So here we are on our listen page. Now here you can see we have a yellow play button, and our next button is inactive, so we can't go to the next page until we listen. Here we have set 6, and some terminology that's important to know about Render is sets and passages. So all of the translation will be done at the passage level, so they will translate passages. Now a passage could be as small as a proverb or as big as a parable. When these passages make sense to put together, we'll put them together in a set. So this page will listen to the entire set. So if you think of something like the Beatitudes, they would translate each Beatitude as its own passage, but we'd want them to listen to the whole thing for the context. So here we have set 6, and there's actually only one passage in this set. So let's click our yellow play button and listen.
Jesus sat down opposite the place where the offerings were put and watched the crowd putting their money into the temple treasury. Many rich people threw in large amounts, but a poor widow came and put in 2 very small copper coins, worth only a fraction of a penny. Calling his disciples to him, Jesus said, "I tell you the truth, this poor widow has put more into the treasury than all the others. They all gave out of their wealth, but she, out of her poverty, put in everything, all she had to live on."
Okay, so now that we've listened, this is our optional action here. We can listen as many times as we want. We've got our blue play button, but now our next button is active. So let's go to the next page. So this is our record page here, and this is where all of the hard work of translation happens. This page we'll probably spend a few minutes on, but translators, translation teams can spend hours on this page. So We have another yellow play button here, and this is our first passage. And as I said, there's only one passage in this set, so this will be the same audio that we just listened to.
Jesus sat down opposite the place where the offerings were put and watched the crowd putting their money into the temple treasury. Many rich people threw in large amounts, but a poor widow came and put in 2 very small copper coins, worth only a fraction of a penny. Calling his disciples to him, Jesus said, "I tell you the truth, this poor widow has put more into the treasury than all the others. They all gave out of their wealth, but she, out of her poverty, put in everything, all she had to live on."
So that was our main source, and now we can see that a couple other things are active on this page. So here on this side, we can have up to 4 sources in render. So these are our other sources here. We also have this headphones button here, and if we press this, this is our entire set. So if we had multiple passages, we could use this as a source. We also have our yellow record button here. So this means you can record now. We might spend some time in between this if it was a narrative portion of Scripture, maybe acting it out or doing a storyboard, but we'll just jump right in. So if you want to put on these headphones, if you want to attempt to record.
I'll try.
Great. Okay, so I'll press the record button and you can go when you're ready.
وقعد يسوع قدام المكان اللي الناس بتيجي وتحط عطاياها معاهم. وهم قاعدين كان في ناس كتير بتيجي وتحط عطاياهم في الخزنة، وكان ناس كتير بتحط فلوس كتير، لكن اللي ما خدوش بالهم منه انه في واحدة ست كبيرة دخلت وحطت عملتين قيمتهم اقل حتى من درهم واحد. بص يسوع لتلاميذه وقال لهم: انتوا عارفين الست دي ادت اكتر من كل الناس اللي ادوا، لانهم كلهم ادوا من غناهم، لكن هي ادت من احتياجها، ادت كل اللي عندها.
Great. Now that we've done our recording, we have to listen back to it. So we'll press the yellow play button here.
وقعد يسوع قدام المكان اللي الناس بتيجي وتحط عطاياها معاهم. وهم قاعدين كان في ناس كتير بتيجي وتحط عطاياهم في الخزنة، وكان ناس كتير بتحط فلوس كتير، لكن اللي ما خدوش بالهم منه انه في واحدة ست كبيرة دخلت وحطت عملتين قيمتهم اقل حتى من درهم واحد. بص يسوع لتلاميذه وقال لهم: انتوا عارفين الست دي ادت اكتر من كل الناس اللي ادوا، لانهم كلهم ادوا من غناهم، لكن هي ادت من احتياجها، ادت كل اللي عندها.
Great. So you maybe noticed some things that you would change about your translation and your recording. So we have another record box here. One thing that you can do is record in both of them, delete, re-record. So you can go back and forth as many times as you'd like before you're happy with a recording of your translation. We encourage people that once they have a recording that they really like, to do another one as a performance. Okay. So that's another benefit of having these 2 boxes here. But let's go for it again. So we'll click this yellow record button and you can record another rendition.
وقعد يسوع جنب المكان وهي ادت من احتياجها، هي ادت كل حاجة عندها.
Great. So now that we have 2 recordings, we might spend some more time on this, but let's move forward. So which one would you like to choose?
I'll go for this one.
Okay, let's choose that one. And one more thing here, I can take the headphones back from you. We have a note button here. So before we send this on to the other team for review, we can record a note here and submit that note. So we'll send a note along with our translation. So we have a yellow submit button here. So let's submit that. Now before we pass this along, we have to do one final review. So this is our translation and the source. So we have one more listen before we send it on. So let's listen to your translation.
وقعد يسوع جنب المكان اللي بيحط فيه العطايا بتاعتهم.
But she, out of her poverty, put in everything, all she had to live on.
So now that we've listened to our translation alongside the source, we have an option to make. We can go back and re-record, or we can pass it and send it to the peer review team. For the purpose of the demo, we'll pass this along. So now we're back at our home page, and we can see that our translate icon is gray. We don't have any more work to do. So we'll log out and log back in as the translation team 2. So here we have some more yellow icons. We have our peer review, so this will be reviewing that translation that we just did. And we also have a yellow revise icon. So we have 3 revise icons here, and I'll just talk briefly about that. There's our peer revise. You can see the 2 little heads there. We have a community revise, the 3 heads. And we also have a consultant revise, and that's just the 1 person in there. And all of these are chances to do a re-recording and revise and change your translation. And we'll look at that a little bit closer later. So let's go in the peer review here. Now here we have our peer review page, and this looks very similar to that passage review. We have the translation alongside the source. Now, as the peer review team, we'll listen to those along with any notes and decide if there's anything missing or added or incorrect, and decide if we want to send it back to the team to maybe consider re-recording and revising their translation, or we can pass it along to the community. So let's start out by listening to the note.
Record a note.
Okay, so that was the note we just recorded. And listening to the translation.
وقعد يسوع جنب المكان اللي
But she, out of her poverty, put in everything, all she had to live on.
So now that we've listened to the other team's translation alongside the source, we decide if we want to pass it and send it to the community or send it back and maybe make some revisions. So let's send it back and tell them that there might be some revisions that need to be made here. So now we have a gray icon, no more work to do here in the peer review. And let's log out and come back in as the translation team. So here we have our peer revise. We'll click on that yellow icon. We have a note here from the other team. We'll click on that. If we decide to revise the translation, we'll re-record. If we don't want to revise it, but we want to pass the set on to the community, we'll click pass and record a note explaining why we passed it on. We also have the option to record a note back to the team with or without a revision. And let's log out here now, and let's look at the community check. So with our community check, we have 2 different parts. We have a retail community check, which is where the community will listen to the passages and retell them, tell them back. We also have a question and response portion, where the community will listen to questions that have been set up and then give their answers to that, and we record that in Render. So we need to set up questions for the community, and that's what this role here is for, the community check setup. So let's click on our yellow icon here, and here we have our setup page. So we have a blue play button here because we've already listened to the set, and so let's just go in and set up a question. So we'll press the play button.
There is a saying that says, love your friends and hate your enemies.
And we'll pause in a spot that we might want to ask a question. We'll press the flag button here and record our question. So we could say something like, what are some characteristics of someone who is called an enemy? So you can go through all of that set audio, all of that translation, pausing and planting flags and recording your questions in specific spots in the audio. So we'll just go ahead with this one question and click the yellow finished button here. So now again, no more work to do. So let's log out and come back in as the community check. So here we have our 3 community checks. Render can do 1, 2, or 3 community checks. So we have all 3 here. And all these communities will be answering those same questions and doing retelling of that translation. So let's go into the first community check. So here we have our listen page. The first step is to play the entire set for the community. So we'll press the yellow play button here.
There is a saying that says, love your friends and hate your enemies. But I tell you, love your enemies. Pray for those who persecute you. In this way you'll be acting as true sons of your Father in heaven. For he gives sun to both evil and good people. He sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. If you only love those who love you, what reward will you get? Are not even the tax collectors doing that? And if you only greet your own people, what are you doing more than others? Do not even the heathen people do that? Be perfect, therefore, as your heavenly Father is perfect.
So now that we've listened to the set, we can go to the next page. And the first step in the community check is the retell. So we'll listen to our passage here.
There is a saying that says, love your friends and hate your enemies. But I tell you, love your enemies. Pray for those who persecute you. In this way you'll be acting as true sons of your Father in heaven. For he gives sun to both evil and good people. He sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous.
Now, after we've listened to the passage, we'll have the community give their retelling of that passage and submit that. We'll go to our next passage here. Listen to the passage.
If you only love those who love you, be perfect, therefore, as your heavenly Father is perfect.
And again, we'll do our retelling, have the community do their retelling of that passage and submit it. So now that we've done the retell portion of the community check, we've come to the question and response portion. So here we have our question that we set up. You can see this looks very similar to that setup page that we saw. And this yellow play button here will be the audio up to that question. So the first thing, we'll play this.
There is a saying that says, love your friends and hate your enemies.
And then after playing that translation up to the question, we'll play that question that we recorded.
What are some characteristics of someone who is called an enemy?
And then the community has a chance to respond to that question. So after this, let's go home and log out. After all of those community checks are done, it will go back to the team again for review. So we'll look at this briefly. Come in as the community revise. And so this is the translation that we did, went to the community, and now it's come back to us. So we have a bunch of yellow headphones here. Click on it, and here we have all of our retells, our 3 retells from the community, and our 3 question and response portions from the community. So we listen to all that information, decide if we want to re-record or just pass the translation along as is. So we'll close, log out, and let's come back in as the back translator. So here we have our 2 types of back translation. Render can do one or both types of back translation depending on the consultant's preferences. The retell back translation will be done at the passage level. So they will tell it back at the same level that it was translated. And this really helps the consultant understand what the translation means. We also have a breath pause back translate. And in this one, Render will look for pauses where the translator took a breath, and that's generally a phrase level translation, and that really helps the consultant understand what the translation says. So let's go in as the retell back translator. Here we have our set. We've already listened, so we have our blue play button, and we'll go to the next page. Here we have our entire set loaded. We'll choose our first passage here, go to the record page, and here we are on our record page for retell. So we'll listen to the translation, record our retell back translation, and submit it. Now Render will keep feeding you each passage until you've done your retell back translation on the entire set. So let's go back and take a look at the breath pause back translate. So here, same thing, the first step is to listen to the set for context. We already did, so blue play button, and we'll go to the next page. And here we have our select page. This is the same set that the retell was on, but you can see these smaller pieces. So Render looked like there's some pausing here, and it cut it in those smaller pieces. So we'll choose the first piece here and go to the record page. So let's listen to the translation.
After John was put in prison, Jesus went into Galilee.
Now you have some options. If maybe that's too long to translate back into the consultant's language, you can cut it up into smaller pieces. So we can play this.
After John was put in prison,
And that's maybe a good place to cut it. So we'll cut that and go back to the record page. We'll listen
after John was put in prison,
and record our back translation. After John was put in prison, and listen to that. After John was put in prison, and we'll submit that, and we'll be fed our next piece.
Jesus went into Galilee.
So at the end of that, I kind of heard that there was a breath, and maybe they were about to say another word, and that might be, I might need that piece for this, so I'll click the plus button here and add that next piece, and we'll listen to that.
Jesus went into Galilee, and he proclaimed the good news of the gospel.
And actually, I didn't really need to add that, so I'll just undo that and go back to that smaller piece. So as the person doing the breath pause back translation, you have some options in editing that audio. And there are times where Render might cut it off in the middle of a word, so you can add and cut and undo as need be. Render will keep feeding you each little piece in that entire set until you're done with that. So let's go out here and come back in as the transcriber. Now, about transcribe, it's important to know that Render does not attempt to transcribe or write down the translation. It only transcribes back translations and notes. So we'll come in here, and here we can see that we have set 2, and this is our breath pause back translation. You can tell by those smaller pieces. So we'll choose this first piece, go to the transcribe page, and here we will do our transcription. So we'll click the loop button, play the audio over and over, and press play.
Jesus and his disciples were in walk to Jerusalem. Jesus and his disciples were in walk.
Okay. So we'll listen and type that out, and we'll submit that. And again, Render will feed you each piece until you've typed out all of that breath pause back translation and all of the retell and notes. So let's go out. Now that the back translations, transcriptions, any note translations are done, we'll come in as the consultant. So here we have our consultant check. Now this is our sets page, so this will list all sets that we either need to review or have reviewed. We only have one set here, and as you can see, there's a little yellow dot there. This indicates that we have work to do. It's yellow. Now, if we had done work on this set and sent it back to the team, it would be a blue dot. And if we decided we wanted to pass this set, then it would have a check mark. So let's select this set and go to our review page. So here on our review page, we have all of our back translations and the drafts from the team on this drop-down. So you can see that here. And we also have all of our notes on this side. So you can see that the team has done 2 drafts on this. We sent a note back and the team responded. So let's listen to what we told the team to do.
This is a really great oral translation. In the back translation in passage 2, it says, "The heavens are for them." Please change this to be more like passage 9, where it says, "The reign of God is theirs."
So that was our note back to the team. And the team responded with a note, and they said,
Okay, I used the same translation that I used for passage 9, where it says, the reign of God. Thank you.
So these notes and drafts are also over here. You can see this note here that we just listened to has been transcribed. And here on this side, we have our breath pause and retell back translation transcriptions. So we can also read along with those audio notes and back translations. So let's look on this side. We have breath pause and retell. So let's listen to our breath pause back translate.
When Jesus saw to the multitudes, himself went up to a hill, and himself sat there.
So we can listen through the entire set of that back translation. And we can also listen to the retell back translation here.
When Jesus saw the multitudes, he went up on a hill, and he sat down.
So listen through that entire back translation. Now we can see that our pass button is yellow, and that's because we haven't recorded any notes yet. So if we want to pass this translation, we can do that, listen through, review, and say, I think it's pretty good, don't need to change anything. But if we want to suggest something back to the team that maybe they need to revise, we'll record a note. So let's do that. So we can record a note back to the team, talk about what they might need to change. We can also add more to that note. And maybe you guys did a really great job. I forgot to say that at the beginning. So we'll grab that note and we'll move that note over to the beginning. We can also add a note in the middle here. So add a note in between two other notes. And if we accidentally said something that we realize now that we've listened through some more of the back translations, that they actually don't need to revise that, I'll delete that note. So we can go through and create notes for the team and edit them as needed. So we'll suggest that and send that back to the team. And now you can see we have a blue dot here. So that's been sent back to the team. So let's go home and I'll show you one more part of render, and that is the note translate. So here we come in as a note translator, and this is really helpful when someone on the translation team, as well as the consultant, no one in that group, no one speaks a common language. So we need to translate those notes between them. So these are actually those notes we just created in the consultant check. So we'll choose the first note, go to the next page, listen to the note, and record our translation of the note for the team. Render will keep feeding you those pieces until you've translated all of the notes, and it'll go back to the team for review. So let's log out, and that's render. If you have any questions for us, you can always contact us at info@renderpartners.com.